Cole Cubelic has some very interesting comments about the departure of Cam Coleman and Deuce Knight. We discussed that, and A-Day returns to a traditional format. Let's go, baby. A-Day's back. All that on this edition of the Uptempo podcast.
You are now listening to the War Report Podcast Network.
Yes, indeed. What's up, everybody? Welcome into today's episode of the Uptempo podcast. As always, I'm your host, Dustin Smith. Go ahead and do us a favor. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, wherever you get your audio, leave a 5-star review. Follow us over there. Turn on your automatic downloads. The topic of today's discussion is one former Auburn Tiger, Cole Cubelic. He had some comments that made a little bit of noise, got some people talking. So we'll discuss those comments. Also, Alex Golesh and Auburn announced that A-Day is back. We're going to go back to a traditional type spring game format. We'll talk about what that means. And for anybody that I've been getting a lot of people hitting me up saying, where's the basketball? Where's the basketball? So Auburn falls last night to Missouri 94-84. In the third segment, the final segment, I'll share my brief thoughts on that and where this Auburn basketball team kind of goes from here, if there's anything that they really can do. I kind of think it is one of the situations where they are what they are. But let's talk about one comments from Cole Cubelic. I'm sure by now most of you have heard him. So if you haven't, you can go find it. It's all over the internet. But he basically, just to kind of paraphrase what he said here and sum it up, he said, stop crying about losing Deuce Knight and Cam Coleman. And he talked about the production from Cam Coleman. Is that really that irreplaceable? And he talked about how Deuce Knight's played in one game. So, and he talked about, he talked about some of the other stuff, some of the antics. And, I want to be clear here. I think he made mention of like Cam Coleman with the pink ski mask and the watches and stuff like that. But I want to be clear on my stance. I don't think that Cam Coleman and Deuce Knight were really like big locker room problems. And Cole didn't say that, but I'm kind of getting into my thoughts now. Because one thing is that Auburn offered both of those guys like a handsome contract to stay. Right. So now compare that to other starters. And you can look at the cornerback room in particular, look at some starters that were productive that Auburn let walk, that Auburn didn't push that hard on. You can use Malcolm Simmons as an example of that as well on the offensive side, of a guy that has some production, that's done a little bit, that you like and you think is a good player, but maybe Auburn let some of those guys walk because it wasn't worth the headache. So I want to be clear here. Auburn tried their best to get Cam Coleman back. Auburn tried their best to get Deuce back, and I've said on this show several times, I think that the plan for Deuce, that Auburn presented was a great plan. Like, still going to get a nice contract. You can still be QB2 and sit behind a guy that's got 1 year of eligibility left, and then you're the guy as long as you do the necessary things and practice and everything. The following year as a redshirt sophomore, it's your job as Auburn's starting quarterback. I think that was a good offer. Now, to kind of tie back into some of the stuff that Cole said, in Deuce, like the social media stuff, look, that's not always scrubbing the social media whenever he got upset, taking the Auburn and all that. Look, that's not, if you're an older person listening to this and you're like, is that a big deal? It's not getting arrested, right? Like some guys that were getting significant reps on the team were getting arrested during the season. It's not that kind of causing problems. It's not, demanding more money. Or there was a lot of crap that went on behind the scenes, right, that we're kind of learning about now, or that some people knew about and was becoming public later. But so I want to be clear, like, I don't think that Deuce was that kind of guy. But the scrubbing of the social media and that kind of stuff, taking Auburn off in the middle of the season, that's not the behavior of a franchise quarterback. And I said this on our members live show last night, where if you have aspirations of being an NFL quarterback, You have to behave like a franchise quarterback. You know what the implications are. You know what people are going to think if in the middle of the season you take all the Auburn stuff off your profile. And then you put it back on and you take it back. Like, you know what that's going to do. So it is like, it's just kind of silly behavior. And me personally, I don't have a problem with the Cam Coleman with the pink ski mask and the 2 watches and all that. But I'll tell you this, like, it's not a good look when you're losing games. And here's the part, there's a part that Cole said at the end of his comments that really, that's the most important point in all of this. He said 1 player doesn't make the team. 2 players don't make a football team. That's the important part. And this goes back to what I kept saying during the whole roster retention discussion. One, that's just not really realistic. That's not realistic with a coaching change in 2025. But also, it doesn't matter. What matters is if Alex Golesh, and what I was saying before Golesh was hired was whoever the next hire is, what matters is if his program is structured and organized and efficient, and if his process, if his scheme, if the football stuff, if we can actually move the football and get into the end zone, right? Like all that matters is if the head coach is the right hire. That's all that ever mattered. Because right now, more so than ever, college football is a year-by-year proposition. Your team changes year by year. At least every 2. Maybe you can get a lot of guys to come back for 1 more year and but like the turnover is much more than it has ever been. We can all agree on that. So you just need a coach that can put in a good structure. And then obviously the scheme and the play calling and all that has to be high level. Auburn lagged all of that. So I do think it's interesting. That now that all this kind of stuff has come out, to see people kind of, the fan base kind of fully understand and fully grasp what all was going on. And, everything that Cole said, for the most part, I'm in agreement with, because Cam, like, this was the point I kept making at the time. If Cam Coleman came back to Auburn, next year, he's only there for 1 more year. All this talk about roster retention for what? Guys that only have 1 or 2 more years of eligibility. You're trying to get your next head coach. You want him to be the head coach for 7, 8, 9, 10 years. Longer than that. So I really agree with how Cole kind of wrapped up his comments, where he said at the end of the day, these guys are not bigger than the team. Like this, if there's a thought process out there among some of the fans, like, how are we going to move on without these guys? We're winning games anyway. And I've said it for a long time. Individually, I think a lot of these guys were doing the right things. But as a unit, that loser mindset, that loser mentality, that's what won out. Shout out to my guy Caesar over at the Warport. Every time I would come on the post game after a tough loss, 2 years ago, before everybody was really out on Hugh, he was like, Dustin, you always say the losing culture, Auburn doesn't know how to win. Like, and we're seeing and we're hearing and we're finding out now. And it's just funny, because you think back to when Jake Crane said Auburn needs to fumigate the building. He said that after the Iron Bowl. He said there's just a lot of stuff going on that leads to a losing culture, and Auburn needs to clean house. And so many people got mad at Jake and jumped down his throat. Called him a bad fan. They would never watch the stuff again, all this kind of stuff. I said a lot of that stuff really before the season when I gave my record prediction and took a lot of heat for it. Lost subs, lost memberships, took a lot of heat for saying, look, there's some culture issues here. There's some issues in the process of way the game plan is set up and then the way it's called on game day. And I just can't pick Auburn to go any higher than 7-5. And I only even predicted 7-5 because I was super high on DJ Durkin and the defense and just thought there's some way, somehow, that maybe the Cam Colemans of the world can make a big play. But ultimately, we all saw what happened. So it's we've been saying this for a while. And it's you don't look, it was obvious. Like if you're just watching the games and you know what you're looking for, you could tell, man, there was a lot of issues that were taking place. That fourth down versus Georgia on the road a couple years ago, and then the way it was handled after in the media. You didn't have to be any kind of insider. You could be sitting on your couch in California. If you just watched how that went down that week, you understood there was a lot of culture issues at Auburn. There was a lot of issues in the process. So I'm saying all that to make the bigger point of, if Alex Golesh is the right head coach for Auburn, players will come and go. But if his system and in his process, and then the football side of things on Saturday, if his game planning, if his play calling, if the development of individual players and all those kind of things, right? There's a lot that goes into this. It's not easy. But if those things are all in the plus, if he can do all those things and get all those things right, then players will come and go. But Auburn will win football games. And that's ultimately what we all want. So just very interesting conversation, very interesting to kind of see a lot of this stuff coming out in the post Hugh Freeze era and kind of seeing the fan base now understand what a lot of people were saying about what was going on. Another thing that I love here, A-Day returning to this traditional format. One, I love this just because it's what we saw last year, just from a fan perspective, was hard. That was hard to watch. Just had a little open practice. There wasn't a whole lot of people there. It wasn't really pushed or advertised. They didn't make a big deal about it like they're supposed to do for A-Day. We all love A-Day, man. Growing up, my family, we would go every year because it was sometimes free, sometimes $5, and then there was a lot of times you would have the baseball game in the afternoon or softball, and you'd go to that, and there was all kind of stuff to do around campus. Unfortunately, I believe baseball and softball are actually going to be in Gainesville that weekend, so that kind of sucks. But I think it's big time, most importantly for the fans, because, again, last year was really hard to watch. Nobody had any fun with that. It's a nice break. It's a nice break in April. It always has been a nice little break. It gives you a little bit of taste. You're right there in the middle of just craving some football. It's been a couple of months since the Super Bowl ended. In Auburn's case, it's been 4 or 5 months since the season ended. You miss football. And you always were, all right, here we go. And I've been to some A-Days, man, where there's, 60, 70,000 people in there. And I think that this one, I'm willing to bet that this one, if there's good weather, will be plus 50,000 people, because I can sense in the fan base that there's kind of this, everyone's fired up, which always happens when you have, well, not always, but when you make a new hire, a lot of times you're going to kind of get that, we're clean slate, starting over. Everybody's optimistic and fired up again. And that's where Auburn is. And kind of tying into the first segment, I think now a lot of people are starting to see what some of the issues were, and they feel like that Auburn has a guy in here that's corrected those issues, or is attempting to correct those issues. So I think that right now Alex Golesh has a lot of public support from the Auburn fans, and I think that they're going to show up for A-Day and be excited, see Byron Brown, see all these new faces, right? It's going to be a brand new team. It's going to be a lot of new faces. So Going to be a lot of new names for us to get to learn and get to see out there. So really excited for the fans that we get to see this, but also for the football team. Because just when we talk about that losing culture of the previous regime, the previous staff, are you surprised when think back to the Maryland game, the Music City Bowl game, when Hugh said, I wasn't really involved in the game plan like that because I was out recruiting. And that didn't sit well with everybody that drove up to Nashville and sat in below 30-degree weather to watch a game that the head coach didn't prepare for because he was trying to recruit and build for the future. It's like, well, dang, man, you could have tried to win the bowl game and still done that, right? That kind of mindset, this mindset of, and I get it, the spring portal was there and all that. I mean, if you just watched last A-Day, did it feel competitive to you? Did it feel like an atmosphere of competition to you? It didn't to me. Sometimes, man, you can watch some of that stuff and you're like, man, are we cooked? Like, it definitely didn't feel like there just wasn't that vibe. There wasn't that juice in the air. I want to see A-Day this year where people are out there hitting a little bit. Let's see some pads popping. Let's see some guys, who's going to rise to the top of this wide receiver room? Who's going to be the starting rotation in this wide receiver room? Let's see those guys battle. I want to see them fight. The team's not complete. There's going to be all kind of position battles we're going to talk about all off season long. But I'm really excited, man, and this is big time for the fans. So I love it. I love it. Going to talk about this basketball game here in just a moment right here on the Uptempo podcast. I want to give a big thank you to everybody that continues to support us through the memberships. $3.99 a month will get you into the JV squad. $5.99 a month will get you into that varsity squad. Level up today, man. This gets you exclusive content to the Uptempo podcast. We've already put out 2 film reviews this week and had a live show for the members yesterday where we watched the majority of the basketball game. Well, I think I tapped out at about 9 minutes to go. But we watched the majority of the basketball game, took you guys' comments. We discussed some portal stuff and just kind of hung out for about 2 hours and had a good time. So lots of perks if you sign up, or if you just want to support the show, man, this is the best way to do it. And hey, also, it's absolutely free to just hit that like button and subscribe to the channel and just tune in. And I thank each and every one of you that continue to do that. Auburn basketball falls on the road to Missouri, 84-74. This is a tough one. This was a tough one for Auburn, a game that after beating Arkansas this weekend, Auburn was hoping to come in on the road and get a little bit of momentum, but it just wasn't meant to be. Outscored 38-34 in the first half, and then outscored 46-40 in the second half. Missouri was just kind of the better team throughout. I think the story to me of this game was Auburn's perimeter defense just not good enough. It just was not good enough. Defense as a whole. And if you look at the field goal percentage, Missouri shoots 56.3% from the field. Auburn only shoots 40.7%. Missouri makes 9 3-pointers for 47.4%. Auburn shoots 6 of 21 for 28.6%. And then both teams are pretty abysmal at the free throw line. Missouri is 21 of 31. Auburn's 20 of 28. Auburn actually out-rebounded Missouri. Missouri had 7 more assists, 1 more block. And then Missouri actually had 13 turnovers to Auburn's 11. And points in the paint were pretty even. So really the story here is Auburn's poor shooting. And look, when we look at this team as a whole, I've been saying this for a couple of weeks now because I always said during the offseason, let me see the team first because it's a brand new team with a brand new coach. I just didn't know what to expect. So I'll have to see some games before I know what we're looking at here. We're looking at a team that's not that deep and doesn't have an inside presence. And last night, Auburn's just not going to win a game where Keyshawn Murphy has 9 points and Todd Pettiford had 9 points, and they were very inefficient. Those guys have to be north of 15, 16 points if Auburn's going to win conference games on the road. So if you have your 2 best players both have an off shooting night, Auburn's not deep enough to overcome that. This isn't last year's team where you have the Miles Kelly and Denver Jones. You just go down the list, and every guy is capable of putting the ball in the hoop. That's not this year's squad. So if the top two guys are if they're not getting buckets, Auburn's in trouble, because Auburn's going to have to outshoot teams with the lack of the inside presence. And also, Auburn's just not that deep this year. They're just not that deep. So if Keyshawn Hall and Tahad Pettiford are going to have bad games, then especially on the road, Auburn's in trouble. And Auburn, in terms of making the tournament, this Auburn basketball team's in trouble. 10-7. There's some winnable games coming up. But look, I said this on the watch party last night. This Auburn basketball team, it's a bubble team, to where I wouldn't be surprised if they won some games and got hot, because the top end of the roster is good. If Tahad and Keyshawn Hall get hot and have a streak of good games here, I wouldn't be surprised to see Auburn make the tournament, but it's going to be close. And right now, already sitting at 10-7, they're going to have to really put a streak together and finish strong. It's just going to be tough. It's just going to be tough. That non-conference schedule, in my opinion, was a little too tough and set this team back a little bit. I thought they should have had an easier road to kind of build up the rotation, build up an identity, build up a confidence. I thought that non-conference schedule, when you had 10, 11 new players with a brand new coach, I thought that was absurd, honestly. And I thought this team kind of got off to a bad start because of that, record-wise, and in some of the things I just mentioned. So you're still kind of searching for an identity and stuff like that. You see Philip Jovic kind of coming into his game now. Could he have done that a little bit quicker and been a little bit more assertive if maybe you didn't play such a ridiculous non-conference schedule? I mean, that road game out to Arizona for no reason was just absurd. You could have easily just played whoever, just a small school that you were going to beat their brains in by 40. You could have easily done that at home, and I think it would have been better for this year's team. This year's team was not last year's team. We knew last year's team was going to be able to withstand that non-conference schedule. I didn't think they were going to go through it the way they did, but we knew that was a veteran team with a lot of talent, with a coach that had been the head coach at the school for 10 or 11 years or whatever it was at this point. This situation, I think the non-conference schedule was a detriment to this team that really kind of got them off on the wrong foot. And it's just holes in the roster. Teams are attacking the paint. And there's no resistance defensively. And it's just like football, guys, where your secondary hurts if you can't get pass rush. If you don't have an interior presence defensively, teams can attack that and open up the perimeter. And you're seeing a lot of that. It's all connected. So tough. This Auburn basketball team definitely needs to put it together and get some wins. But that's going to wrap up today's show, man. Thank you guys for tuning in. Like the video on the way out. Subscribe to the channel. Share it out on social media. You can tag me at DMcShaw28. You can tag the War Report Podcast Network. I thank each and every one of you for watching. We'll see y'all later on in the week. War Damn Eagle.